Hello all and welcome to our first lecture regarding Perl scripting. We're going to go through a slight introduction and we're going to work through some first steps in Perl to get us started, and then we're going to learn how to write some code with using some simple values. So let's go ahead and get started. Perl was written by a gentleman named Larry Wall while he was working at a NASA Jet Propulsion Lab. Perl, though, is in no way, shape, or form associated with NASA. They've pretty much don't want to claim it. Anyway, it started as a language to convert between data formats of various other tools. So porting data between two different computer software programs that they were using for analysis or etc. The syntax for Perl was taken from C, Pascal, Basic, Unix, and English itself. So why is it called Perl? Well, according to Dr. Wall, it has a few different acronyms. Two of his favorite were the original practical extraction reporting language, and his other favorite was a pathologically eclectic rubbish lister. Kind of like the second one, but that's me. Perl's motto is there is more than one way to do it. So it's kind of Perl's idea that you can do something in many different ways, which is something I completely agree with. So it is kind of a language that I like. Perl has a lot of good strengths to it. It is very easy to learn. It's easy for humans to write because it is more towards that English language than machine language. It is portable. You can run it on many, many different operating system platforms. Perl talks text. We're going to see a few examples of that, but it looks as a string and not a bunch of characters put together as a string. It is a high-level language. Again, that means it's closer to English, so it's easier for humans. And one of the best is that it is free. It is open source. What is Perl used for? Well, its most popular use is for CGI programming and dynamically generating web pages. Amazon uses Perl for their websites. The original use was to extract data from one source and then translate that data into a different format for another software to read in as its input. It is good for system administrative tasks like sending automated emails, cleaning up systems, producing reports. It can create clients, servers, and proxies for the internet. It does work on most internet protocols such as IRC, WWW, FTP. But the first thing we're going to have to do is download and install Perl. So it will run on most operating systems. When you pull up the download page, it immediately takes you to a Unix, Linux installation, a Mac OS, and a Windows. You go to www.perl.org and go to downloads. And for my Windows, I use the Strawberry Perl. So go ahead and click on the Get Started, get it all installed on your machine, and then we can get going. Going through interpreted versus compiled code, Perl is interpreted. It needs an interpreter to process the source code every single time you run the program. If something is compiled, typically you compile it once and run many times. Perl is considered a byte compiled, so it's kind of in between an actual full-out interpreted and a full-out compiled. The interpreter is going to read the source code, but it compiles the whole program at one time. What it compiles it into is it compiles it into something called bytecode, which is read into a virtual machine kind of environment. Now, bytecode, you can save it away for later. You can translate it to the native machine code of your computer and run that instead. Or you can run it through a program that pretends to be the virtual machine and actually step through the bytecode and perform appropriate actions. For the most part, what we do is this last one. And we run it through a program that pretends to be the virtual machine, and we actually run it as a program. Perl does have libraries, modules, and packages. The word libraries is a little bit antiquated in Perl, and We usually call it module now, but a module is a file or a bundle of files that is going to help accomplish a specific task. It works on your disk. A package, on the other hand, is another way to divide up a program. It ensures that one section of your program does not affect another, but a package is purely part of the source code and it's not partitioned on your disk. The core are the actual modules that come with Perl's initial installation. They are sometimes called the module library, or they were called libraries, but typically when you hear module library, it is the elements that come with that Perl installation. Let's move on and find our first program. Our typical programmer hello world. Our plain text can be edited with any text editor or your NetBeans. I prefer NetBeans because it does give a little bit more indication with color changing words and matching up parentheses. So it's a little bit easier in my mind, but it is also a command line execution how we're going to run it. So this right here is an example of a single Perl script. So the first line, the hashtag is typically used as a comment, and we'll look at that in a little bit, but that hashtag and the exclamation point together is telling the interpreter how the file should be run. So we're going to run this file using the interpreter located at the location of /user/bin/Perl. The -W option turns on additional warning reporting for your script as you're running it. So that first line is going to be a line that we're going to put in all of our files moving forward. Now, the second line is actually a line that does something. It is a command. It is the print function, lowercase p, print quote hello world, period, /n, double quote, semicolon. So the print function is going to display any of the text that is within the double quotes without the double quotes in there. What's in those double quotes is considered a string, and that /n, just like in C programming language, is an escape character to indicate a new line. So when I run this, it's just going to say hello world, and then the cursor is going to go to a new line. Looking at program structure, we do want to document our programs as always. We do have keywords that are words Perl already knows or uses. We are going to use functions, which if you think of a sentence in English, it is the verb. The function is the verb. We do have what Perl calls control words, and the control words and the keywords kind of go hand in hand, but they use control words as words such as if, else, then, things like that. So in C or JavaScript or some of the other languages we've looked at, the control words to do looping and decision making are typically not given their own set of their own title. They're just all called keywords, but in Perl we do call them control words. Finally, variables. We want to make our variables meaningful and logical, just like we always do. So here we've got a documented line with the hashtag that says print a short message, and we put it before our hello world, and it is completely ignored because it's a comment. Statements and blocks. So functions are our verbs, and therefore our statements are the sentences. So we end each statement with a semicolon. So each line of code is considered a statement. If we can put blocks of statements together, groups of statements together, and we call that a block. And that would be like putting sentences together into a paragraph. In order to create these blocks, we put our open and closed curly brackets, just like we do in other languages. And indenting helps organize the code visually, but Perl is one of the languages that completely ignores white space. We have the word arguments as well, and it's things you give to a function, just like in other languages. And we typically use brackets or parentheses. So here I can actually send it print with the parentheses, and in it put each word. Here we print several strings in its own set of double quotes, separated by commas. And it is sending each one of those as an argument to the print function. So here is an argument, then we is a second argument, print is a third argument, and so on. The print function is then going to put all of those strings together and print them out. We do have ways of creating non-text printing on the command line within Perl. We call them escape sequences. So we do have some specific escape characters, like a /t meaning a tab, an n is a new line. We can do a backspace, we can ring a bell. You can actually do anything in the Unicode character listing by just saying a /x and then putting the Unicode in the curly brackets. Perl is one of those nice languages that does ignore white space. So we can use as much white space as we want in order to organize it properly for the human eye. Perl has several different types of data. It has, we can call something a literal, and a literal is something that it says it is, just like the word literal. A variable is a word that is going to stand for something else in which you can change the values. Now, a constant, on the other hand, is where your values cannot be changed, but it is standing for something else. We also call this hard-coded. A scalar is going to describe the type of data. A scalar is the fundamental basic unit of data, whatever that happens to be. We do have numbers. We have integers, which are our whole numbers, and floating point numbers, which are decimals. We also do have binary numbers, hexadecimal numbers, and octal numbers. Remember back in the beginning, I said it kind of thinks and talks in strings. Well, here's an example as to why. So we do have strings in Perl, and we have several different ways to do it. We can do a single quote or a double quote. They are going to be executed slightly different. So for our usage, we're always going to use that double quote. We can have something called a quote-like operator where we put a Q and a double slash. That acts like a single quote, and a double Q is a double quote. Here we have something called a here document, and what it does is it basically acts like a mini file embedded into the script. So we start a here document with the double less than sign and a label. And typically we use an EOF, capital E, capital O, capital F for like end of file. But what you do is you put that double less than sign and then the EOF, and then you put all of the text that you want there, and then you put the end, you put that same label. So here it's actually going to print all of this. This is a here document. It starts on the line after the two arrows, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so this is a way to put a large piece of text without actually having to put all of the quotes and things around it. Perl will automatically convert between numbers and strings. So we don't have to indicate what type of variable we have. We just have to say it's a variable. The interpreter is going to treat numbers and strings equally, and it will convert between them behind the scenes. So there's nothing that we have to do an additional. Now, on the other hand, octal, hexadecimal, and binary numbers in strings don't get converted automatically. You actually have to use functions to force a conversion. But for the most part, what we're doing, we're not going to be working with octal, hex, and binary, so we're not worrying about that. We do have the functions, though, over here. We've got printing some numbers. So here we've got use warnings, print OX30 /n, it's going to go ahead and print 0x30. And then 030, it's going to print 030. So it's not going to make that conversion. Perl uses operators just like any other language to do arithmetic, to do listing, to do exponential, things like that. So let's first look. Order of operations is it typically will do a arithmetic operator towards the middle here. Your list operators are anything you put within the parentheses. For exponential, you use a double star. So if you want to say x squared, you say x star star 2. And the unary minus, which is the negative sign. So if I want to say a 2 and a negative 2, that's that unary minus. So here in the box, what I've got is a order of operations. So it's going to do all the list operators first, then it's going to do all the exponents, then it's going to do the negation of anything that you indicate, then it's going to do the multiplication and division, and then finally the addition and subtraction. We can also do comparisons. We've got an and, which is a double ampersand. We have an or, which is a double straight up and down line. We have an exclusive or, and then we have the not, which is the exclamation point. And again, these are very similar to what we have in C. Here, I've got an example of the and. So for example, 1 and 1 is going to give you a 1. So true and true gives a true. Everything else is going to give a false because they're both not the same. We do have the option to do an equality, which is going to return a true or false, and it is the double equal sign as opposed to the single, which is the assignment. We do have the greater than and the greater than or equal to with the same symbols, and the less than or equal to with the same symbols. With our strings, we can do several different things. So we can concatenate strings, which actually kind of glues or puts those strings together. So here, when I've got print several strings here, it's actually going to take print and add to it several. So our new string is print several. Then it's going to add to it that string. So our new string is print several strings, etc. Now, two things that we have that are kind of cool are the repetition operator and our string comparison. Now, the repetition is something you're going to mark it with an X, and you're going to put a number of how many times you want to repeat whatever that string is. So for this example, I have print, quote, go, exclamation point, space, quote, X3. So it's going to print go 3 times. So when you're going to run it, you're going to get go, go, go. At the end of that, you're going to have that new line. So that's kind of cool if you want to repeat words or even letters for when you're spelling. Finally, we do have a string comparison, which is kind of new. The ASCII interpretation is so much more than alphabetical. Yes, it is alphabetical, but it also includes punctuation and symbols and things like that. It also does put uppercase as greater than lowercase, but it is kind of a cool concept to think about. Now, adding in all of those other operators, we've got a final list of operators and how they work and their order of precedence. Looking at variables. So we've got 3 types of data. We've got scalars, we've got lists, and we have hashes. And so therefore, we've got 3 different types of variables. So we've got the scalar. Our lists are going to be converted into arrays, and our hashes are a type of variable. Our scalar variables are going to start with a $sign. So for example, $name. And it's going to hold either numbers or strings, and we use the single equal sign to assign it a value, such as here I've got $name, which is my variable, is equal to the word Bob. Now I can change the value and reassign a variable just by using the equal sign. I can operate and assign it once by using the plus equals or the minus equals, just like we did in other languages. I can do the auto increment or auto decrement by doing the plus plus and the minus minus. It plus plus adds 1, minus minus subtracts 1. And I can do multiple assignments on a single line. Now I've got $A equals $B equals $C equals 3. You can't put that 3 somewhere in the middle. The actual value that you're assigning has to be all the way on the right, but you can stack those variables on the left. So here I've got variable A is going to be equal to variable B is equal to variable C, which is equal to the value 3. Now variable scope everything that we've talked about up to now has been global, which means it can be changed from anywhere in the program. Perl has something called a Lexio variable, which is kind of like a local variable, but a little different. A Lexio variable is only going to live within the block in which they are described, and you're going to use that keyword my. So here I actually have an example. It's bad programming practice, but it works really good as an example. So I've got a variable name record up here outside of everything. This is my global variable record. So when I print here, print we're at record 4. Now when I go into this block, and remember it's a block because of those curly brackets, I've got my $ record, which means this variable record belongs only in here. So when I run this, it's going to say inside the block, we're at record 7. When it closes this block, this record that was in here completely disappears. So when I come out here, it says we're still at record, and it's going to go back to the global and be 4. So remember, if you want to use it as a local variable, use the keyword my. They only work within the brackets in which they are defined. Variable names. So we have some conventions and some ways that we tell Perl what our variables are going to be. And we do that with the variable name. So our scalars are going to start with the $, our arrays are going to start with an @ and our hash is going to start with a %. So you can always look at any variable within Perl and know what its data type is by whatever is in front of the actual word variable. Now, once you start with the indicator, the next character must be either uppercase or lowercase letter or an underscore, cannot be a number. After that, though, you can use any combination of numbers, letters, underscore, up to 251 characters. That would be a really long variable name, so I'm not really sure we would want that. Perl is case sensitive, so capital U user is going to be different than lowercase u user, which is completely different from all caps user. And the combination of a $ and an underscore alone is considered a special command. And in Perl, it's called the default variable. It's a little bit past where we're going to go on this, but just so you know, you can't have a variable named with just the $ and the underscore. Last but not least for today, we're going to look at just some quick way of doing some user input. We do have our standard input, which is typically the keyboard, and our standard output, which is typically the screen. So if I want to get user input, hint, hint, homework CBC, we do something like what is shown here. We print the prompt to the user. So print, please enter something interesting. Then on the next line, we give it the variable in which we want to store what the user input. So here it's going to be a scalar and we're calling it comment. So $comment. We put the equal sign and then we say it's coming from the standard input. So in order to do that, we use the greater than and less than pointy brackets. And in it, we put in all caps STDIN. That is all we're covering in our very first lecture for Perl, so stay tuned for the next one.